The construction foreman wasn't supposed to go down there. The sub-basement wasn't on any blueprint the development company had been given, wasn't in any permit filing, wasn't in any city record going back 30 years. But Ray Bustamante went down there anyway, flashlight in hand, boots crunching on 30-year-old concrete dust, and when the beam of his light hit that door, that massive, gray, German-engineered door set into the wall like a tombstone, he stopped walking. He stopped breathing. He pulled out his phone, called his boss, and said 4 words. "You need to come down here. Hi, my name is Michael, and this is Old Vegas Legends." To understand what was behind that door, you have to go back to where it started. Back to 1953. Back to a 33-year-old Sicilian immigrant standing on Fremont Street with a cardboard suitcase, $40 in his pocket, and a handshake deal from men whose names you did not write down. His name was Dominic Ferrano. Everyone called him Duke. Duke was born in Palermo in 1920, the 4th of 6 children. His father was a tailor. His mother was a woman who, by all accounts, ran the household, the neighborhood, and possibly a small portion of Sicily with the quiet authority of someone who never needed to raise her voice. Duke inherited that quality. He never yelled. He never threatened. He simply made clear, in the most measured tones imaginable, exactly what he expected. And people delivered. He came to America in 1938, landed in Chicago, and found work the way most immigrant men of his generation found work in that city, through an introduction to someone who knew someone who needed something done quietly. By 1945, Duke was running numbers in the near North Side, keeping books for operations the Chicago outfit needed kept clean. He was not muscle. He was not a shooter. He was something rarer and more valuable. He was a man who understood money the way a musician understands a scale, intuitively, completely. The outfit noticed. Of course, they noticed. By 1952, Tony Accardo's organization was expanding west. Las Vegas was wide open. The Flamingo, the Desert Inn, the Sands. The families had their fingers in all of it, but they needed reliable men on the ground. Men who could manage cash flow, keep accurate counts, and not skim for themselves. Duke Ferrano was exactly that man. In 1953, he was given a choice: stay in Chicago and keep doing what he was doing, or go to Las Vegas and build something. Duke took the suitcase and went west. Fremont Street in 1953 was not the Las Vegas of legend. Not yet. It was dusty and bright and raw, a street that smelled like cigarette smoke and ambition and something else. Something harder to name. Possibility, maybe. Or desperation. In Las Vegas, those two things have always smelled alike. Duke spent 5 years learning the market, working at the Golden Nugget as a floor supervisor. Watching. Calculating. Understanding the geometry of how money moved through a casino, from the player's pocket to the felt to the chip tray, to the count room, to the cage, to the vault. Every step of that journey was a place where money could disappear. Duke's job, his gift, was making sure it disappeared in the right direction. In 1958, with backing he never publicly disclosed and a gaming license that took 3 attempts to obtain, Duke Ferrano opened the Caballero Casino on East Fremont Street. It wasn't the biggest casino on the block, wasn't the flashiest. No volcano, no showgirls in 6-foot headdresses, no Frank Sinatra. What the Caballero had was precision. The dealers were the best trained on Fremont. The odds were set to the decimal point. The count room ran like a Swiss watch. Duke had designed it that way deliberately, because Duke understood something most casino operators of his era didn't. The house doesn't need luck. The house needs math. And Duke Ferrano was very, very good at math. From the beginning, the Caballero had a sub-basement. Duke had insisted on it before a single wall went up. And in that sub-basement, Duke had insisted on a vault. What the vault was built for. The vault was poured in 1957, before construction on the Caballero's main floor was even complete. Custom concrete, 14 inches thick, reinforced with steel rebar that Duke had personally inspected. The door was a Diebold model, German-engineered, the same manufacturer that supplied bank vaults to the Federal Reserve branches in the Midwest. It weighed 4,200 pounds. The combination had 6 digits, and Duke was the only person who ever knew all 6. Now, the Nevada Gaming Commission was told the vault was for payroll reserves and chip inventory, which is a little like telling your mother the smell of smoke in your room is from a scented candle. Technically possible, not even slightly convincing. Let me explain what vaults like this were actually for in 1957 Las Vegas. The skim economy was the real economy of mob-run casinos. Money came off the tables before it was counted for tax purposes, before the IRS could touch it, before any paper trail existed. That money had to go somewhere between the count room and the couriers who would eventually drive it to Kansas City or Chicago or Milwaukee in a bag that nobody searched, because the man carrying it was friends with the right people. A vault like Duke's wasn't unusual. What was unusual was how seriously he built it. Most casino vaults of that era were essentially reinforced closets. Duke's sub-basement installation was the kind of structure you would expect to find beneath a federal building. The Diebold door alone cost $12,000 in 1957 money. That's roughly $130,000 today. For a vault the Gaming Commission thought was holding chip reserves, nobody questioned it. That was the beauty of Las Vegas in the late 1950s. Nobody questioned anything that didn't directly threaten their own operation. The city ran on a mutual agreement to look the other way, and as long as everyone honored that agreement, business was good. Duke Ferrano honored the agreement completely. What went into the vault in those early years was, by the accounts of the 2 men who occasionally helped Duke carry things downstairs, a rotating inventory of bundled cash, ledger books, and what one of them described many years later as papers Duke didn't want anyone reading. That same man, a former Caballero floor supervisor named Eddie Gans, gave an interview to a Las Vegas oral history project in 2006. He was 81 years old and not particularly concerned with self-incrimination at that point. He said, "Duke kept records of everything, every payment, every arrangement, every handshake. He believed in documentation the way a priest believes in confession. You put it in writing, you put it away, and then nobody can pretend it didn't happen." Eddie Gans died in 2009. He never said what specifically was in those ledgers, but he smiled when the interviewer asked. The golden years of the Caballero. From 1958 through the mid-1970s, the Caballero was exactly what Duke Ferrano intended it to be. Not famous, not glamorous, profitable. The regulars were a particular breed. Working men and women who had driven in from Henderson or North Las Vegas or the California desert and wanted to gamble without being made to feel small by a tuxedoed pit boss. Duke's philosophy on customer treatment was simple. Treat everyone like they are worth $1 million, because someday one of them might be. The Caballero had a cocktail waitress named Rosalie, who remembered every regular's drink order for 17 years. Duke paid her twice what she could have made anywhere else on Fremont. He understood that Rosalie was not an expense. Rosalie was a retention strategy. The showroom at the Caballero seated 240 people. It never booked the headliners. Duke did not want headliners. Headliners brought crowds you could not control, celebrities who needed babysitting, press who asked questions. Instead, the Caballero booked working musicians, jazz quartets, lounge singers, a rotating cast of performers who were grateful for the steady work and understood the unwritten rule: you played, you got paid, and you did not notice anything you were not supposed to notice. Behind the scenes, the Caballero's relationship with the Chicago outfit ran like a well-maintained engine. Quarterly cash transfers moved through the vault. Couriers arrived, usually on Tuesday evenings when the casino floor was at its quietest, carrying bags that were taken directly downstairs by Duke himself. No intermediary, no witness beyond the man who drove the bag. The amounts varied. The arrangement was consistent. Duke also maintained what could charitably be described as a community relations program with the city's law enforcement and political infrastructure. The Caballero's comptroller, Sal DeMarco, who later cooperated with federal investigators and lived to tell about it, testified in 1982 that Duke kept a separate ledger, handwritten in a private shorthand Sal could partially read. It detailed regular cash payments to at least 3 Clark County sheriffs, 2 gaming inspectors, a district court judge, and Sal believed at least 1 elected official at the federal level, though Sal said he never saw the full entry on that one. Duke kept that page turned away. The vault ate all of it. The cash, the ledgers, the photographs Duke kept of certain meetings in certain places, all serving the same purpose as any insurance policy. Duke Ferrano was not a man who relied on trust alone. He relied on leverage, carefully documented and carefully stored, 14 inches of concrete and a 4,000-pound door between the evidence and the world. By the early 1970s, Duke was in his 50s. He moved slower. He delegated more. He still came to the vault himself, still turned the combination himself, and still never let anyone stand close enough to watch his hands. But the trips downstairs became less frequent. The operation was mature. It ran without constant attention. Duke had built something that did not need him the way it once had. That should have been a comfort. Somehow, it was not. Marcus Ferrano was born in 1949, the eldest of Duke's 2 sons. He grew up between Chicago and Las Vegas, the son of a man who was never fully explained to him. Duke didn't discuss business at home. What Marcus knew about his father's operation, he pieced together the way children of that world always do, overheard phone calls, men who visited and never stayed for dinner, conversations that stopped when he walked into a room. What Marcus wanted to be was an architect. He studied at UNLV in the early 1970s, and his professors said he had genuine talent, a feel for structural logic, for the relationship between a building's bones and its skin. He understood load-bearing walls. He understood, in ways he perhaps didn't fully appreciate at the time, the importance of what you kept hidden beneath the foundation. Duke had 2 sons. Vincent moved to Portland, became a high school history teacher, and was by all accounts absolutely fine with the distance. Marcus was the heir, not by choice, by loyalty and geography and the simple fact that he couldn't bring himself to leave. By 1980, Marcus was effectively running the Caballero while Duke stepped back, and the Las Vegas he was navigating looked nothing like the one his father had built. The gaming control board had grown teeth. The FBI's organized crime division had gone from occasionally troublesome to genuinely dangerous. Operation Strawman had dismantled the skim operations at the Stardust. Men Duke had worked with for 30 years were cooperating with federal investigators or going to prison, or both. Marcus watched it all with the clear eyes of a structural engineer. He could see which walls were load-bearing. He could see which ones were about to fail. He started making decisions Duke never would have made. Quietly discontinued payment arrangements, purged records, pushed for clean audits. Duke let him, mostly. The vault stayed sealed. The combination stayed in Duke's head alone. Marcus didn't push. He understood load-bearing walls. The night the vault was sealed, January 17, 1989, Duke Ferrano was admitted to Sunrise Hospital with congestive heart failure. He was 79 years old. He had been declining for 18 months, though characteristically without drama or complaint. He went to the hospital the way he did everything, on his own terms, having first made sure certain things were in order. He died 2 days later, not at a craps table, not in some blaze of operatic Vegas mythology. He died in a hospital bed with Marcus beside him, a muted television in the corner, a quiet death. Somehow, that makes it sadder. 40 years inside the loudest city in America, and he went out in near silence. Duke would have found that appropriate. Marcus drove back to the Caballero at 2 in the morning and found things were not good. The FBI had expanded a financial investigation that had been circling the casino for 8 months. A former employee had agreed to speak with federal investigators. No subpoena yet, but Marcus's attorney, reached by phone at midnight, was clear it was coming. Most people run, most people shred. Marcus did neither. He was an architect. He believed that structures, properly sealed, could survive anything. Marcus went downstairs. 3 hours in the sub-basement. 4 boxes from Duke's private office. Ledgers, photographs, documents Marcus either could not read or did not want to. Everything went into the vault, alongside what was already there. Then, Marcus turned the combination. 6 digits. Duke had whispered to him in a hospital room 2 days earlier, in the quietest voice Marcus had ever heard him use. He turned the dial, pulled the handle, heard the 4,000-pound door settle into its frame with a sound like something ending. He went upstairs, cooperated with a federal investigation that produced no indictments, and watched the Caballero bleed out over 8 months before closing permanently in September 1989. Marcus never went back downstairs. Not once in the 22 years he had left. 30 years of silence. Between 1989 and 2023, the building that had housed the Caballero changed hands 4 times and became, in sequence, a discount furniture warehouse, a proposed site for a parking structure that was never fully built, a storage facility for a cleaning supply company, and, finally, simply nothing. An empty building on East Fremont Street that nobody had quite gotten around to demolishing. Development deals fell through with such regularity that local real estate people began to regard the property as genuinely cursed, which in Las Vegas is saying something because Las Vegas is not a city that believes in bad luck as an abstract concept. Bad luck in Las Vegas is always someone's fault. The Caballero's bad luck was harder to assign. Marcus Ferrano died in Portland in 2011, age 62, of pancreatic cancer. He had spent the last 2 decades of his life working in residential architecture, designing homes for a mid-size firm in the Pacific Northwest. By all accounts, he was good at it. He never spoke publicly about the Caballero. He told his 2 children, a daughter in Seattle, a son in Denver, that there had been a vault in the sub-basement of the old casino, that it contained his grandfather's business records, and that they should not try to open it. When his daughter asked why, Marcus said, "Because I don't know what's in there, and I don't think I want to." That is either the most honest thing a man ever said, or the least convincing lie in the history of Las Vegas. Possibly both. Through the 2000s and into the 2010s, the vault became something between a rumor and a local legend. In 2017, the Las Vegas Review-Journal ran a brief piece in their history section calling it one of Fremont Street's most persistent urban myths, and noted that no documentation existed confirming the vault's construction. 2 professors from UNLV's history department had looked into it and come up largely empty. One of them told the reporter that if the vault exists, nobody alive knows where it is or how to open it, and if nobody knows those things, it might as well not exist. Which is, if you think about it, exactly what Duke Ferrano intended. In 2023, a Phoenix-based development company purchased the old Caballero property for a mixed-use project. The acquisition was straightforward. The building survey was not. Ray Bustamante had been a construction foreman for 19 years. He'd opened walls across the Southwest that contained things people forgot, lost, or simply never mentioned during escrow. Asbestos, rerouted plumbing. Once, memorably, 2,600 baseball cards organized by year inside an Albuquerque office building. People put things in buildings and either forgot about them or died without telling anyone. When Ray's flashlight hit that D-bolt door in the sub-basement of the old Caballero in March of 2023, he knew immediately this was different. This wasn't forgotten. This was deliberate. This was built by someone who intended whatever was inside to stay inside. The calls went up the chain fast. The development company reached Duke Ferrano's granddaughter Elena in Seattle. Elena called her brother Daniel in Denver. Daniel called an attorney. The attorney called the Nevada State Historic Preservation Office. And then a forensic locksmith named Arthur Yee was flown in from Phoenix. I'd never heard of Arthur Yee before researching this story. I now believe Arthur Yee might be the most interesting man in America. The opening took 11 hours, across 2 days. 11 hours. The diebold mechanism hadn't moved in 34 years and had partly seized. Yee worked in 4-hour shifts, listening to the tumblers with instruments that function, essentially, like a stethoscope for a locked soul. The Ferrano siblings were present both days. Elena later described standing at that door on the second afternoon, feeling something between anticipation and genuine dread. On March 14th, Arthur Yee turned to the small crowd in that sub-basement and said in a tone suggesting this was a perfectly normal Tuesday, "It's open. The lights inside were dead. They went in with flashlights." What they found inside. Let me give you the inventory, because this is where it gets real. The cash came first. 23 bundles of currency, hundreds, 50s, and some 20s, banded in the style of the late 1970s and early 1980s. The total, counted by a forensic accountant and verified by the Nevada Gaming Control Board, came to $241,600, roughly $800,000 in today's money. Sitting in a concrete room, unbothered for 34 years. Part of me was relieved they did not find more. There was something almost humanizing about $240,000. It is a lot of money, but it is not mythological money. It is the kind of money a careful man puts aside, not a cartoon villain. Duke Ferrano was a criminal. He was also precise. The amount felt exactly like him. Then came the ledgers, 11 of them, cloth-bound and handwritten, all in the same hand, Duke's private shorthand, which a forensic team spent 6 weeks partially decoding using Sal DeMarco's 1982 federal testimony as a translation guide. Sal had been Duke's comptroller. He had cooperated with investigators. He had described the shorthand in enough detail that decades later it became the key that unlocked it. What those ledgers contained confirmed what historians had long suspected and never been able to prove. 30 years of cash payments to elected and appointed officials across Nevada. 3 Clark County sheriffs named explicitly, surnames, amounts, and dates. 2 Nevada Gaming Commission inspectors. A state district judge who served on the bench until 1991 and died in 2004, having never been publicly connected to organized crime in his life. The amounts were not enormous, $500 here, occasionally $5,000, but they were consistent, and they were documented with the obsessive precision of a man who trusted nobody and understood that the documentation itself was the insurance policy. There were also 2 entries that federal investigators reviewed when notified in April 2023, with what one source described as considerable interest. Payments routed through intermediaries to recipients identified only by initials in a city, UD Washington. 4 occasions between 1968 and 1974. Larger amounts. No further description. Whether those entries will ever be fully attributed is, as of this recording, still an open question. Some walls are still load-bearing. There were 47 photographs, black and white and early color, Duke with men whose faces have since been identified as senior Chicago outfit figures. Meetings in restaurants and back rooms. At least one image showing what appears to be a transaction at the Caballero's count room table, with faces Duke clearly did not mind having on film. Insurance. Always insurance. There was a loaded .38 caliber revolver with no serial number. I almost did not mention it. Almost. A gun with no serial number in a mob vault from 1957 is so expected it barely registers as a detail. And yet, here we are. And then there was the letter. A white envelope, Duke's handwriting on the front. 2 words, Marcus. Solo. Marcus alone. Dated January 17, 1989. 2 days before Duke died. Written in a hospital bed. Passed to a nurse. Handed to Marcus on the 18th. Carried downstairs on the 19th. Sealed inside the vault. Whether Marcus read it first, nobody knows. Elena Ferrano read it aloud in that sub-basement 34 years later, flashlight in hand. She shared one line publicly, one line from 3 pages of a dying man's handwriting. This city is not what it promised. I believed the promise anyway. That is not your fault. Duke Ferrano spent 40 years running a criminal operation inside the most ambitiously dishonest city in America. And that's the closest he ever came to summing it up. He understood Las Vegas perfectly. What it all means. The cash, $241,000, became the subject of a legal dispute that was, frankly, somewhat predictable. The state of Nevada made a claim. The Ferrano estate made a counterclaim. A portion was held pending resolution of questions about its origins. As of 2024, the matter is still working its way through the courts, which is also, frankly, somewhat predictable. The ledgers were turned over to federal investigators. Whether the entries naming specific officials will produce any action is unclear. Most of the men named are dead. The 2 officials identified only by initials present a more complicated picture that investigators are apparently still working through. The letter from Duke to Marcus was donated by the Ferrano family to the Nevada State Museum. It is currently in archival storage, accessible to qualified researchers. The full text has not been published. Elena Ferrano said she hopes it stays that way, at least for now. It was written to my father, she said. It was private enough that my father kept it sealed for 34 years. I'm not sure it's mine to share. The .38 caliber revolver with no serial number is in a federal evidence facility somewhere in Nevada. I think we can all agree it can stay there. Here is what the Caballero vault actually tells us about Las Vegas, if you pull back far enough to see the full shape of it. Duke Ferrano was not unique. He was typical. Every casino of any significance on Fremont Street in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s had some version of what Duke had. A system of off-book payments, a method of cash preservation that existed outside official accounting, a set of relationships with law enforcement and political figures maintained through the oldest currency in human history. What made Duke unusual was not what he did. It was how carefully he documented it. And what made the Caballero's vault singular was not its contents. It was its survival. Most of those records were destroyed. Not by the FBI, by the operators themselves, when the regulatory environment shifted and the old arrangements became too dangerous to preserve. Duke's generation burned what they needed to burn and moved on. Duke couldn't bring himself to burn anything. He was, at his core, an accountant. He believed that records were sacred. He believed that documentation was protection. He put everything in a vault, turned the combination, and trusted the concrete. And the concrete held. For 34 years, while Las Vegas demolished the sands and the dunes, and the Stardust, and the Desert Inn, and the Riviera, while the city systematically erased its own history in the name of the next mega resort. One 14-inch thick concrete room beneath East Fremont Street preserved everything the city had spent decades trying to forget. There's something almost funny about that. Las Vegas, a city that has turned the erasure of its own past into an art form, a city that implodes its landmarks on purpose and builds parking lots on top of the rubble, was undone, archivally speaking, by one man's refusal to throw anything away. Duke Ferrano built a vault to protect himself. He ended up preserving history instead. Marcus sealed it to save himself. He ended up leaving behind the most complete record of mid-century Las Vegas that has ever been found in a sub-basement. And somewhere under the Strip, under Fremont Street, under the foundations of a dozen properties that have been demolished and rebuilt and demolished again, there are other vaults, other rooms that nobody put on any blueprint, other doors with combinations that died with the men who set them. Ray Bustamante found one. One. In a city built on secrets. Think about that. I started this story with a construction foreman standing in a sub-basement with a flashlight. I want to end it there too, because I keep thinking about that moment. The moment before the door opened. The moment when 34 years of sealed air was still sealed. When Duke's letter was still unread. When the ledgers still held their silence. When the vault was still doing exactly what Duke had built it to do. There is something Las Vegas teaches you, if you pay attention to its history long enough. This city has never been good at keeping secrets. It is too loud, too lit, too desperate to show you everything it has. But occasionally, accidentally, improbably, a secret survives, preserved in concrete, waiting for a flashlight beam. Ray Bustamante wanted to know what was down there. So did I. So did you. And now we know what Duke Ferrano knew, that the truth does not disappear just because you pour concrete over it. It just waits. Sometimes it waits 34 years. Sometimes longer. What other vaults are still out there? I genuinely do not know. But I will keep looking. If you want to come with me, hit subscribe. My name is Michael. This is Old Vegas Legends, and Vegas never forgets.